So this year, 2023, marks the 50th anniversary of Operation Homecoming and the return of nearly 600 American prisoners of war from Vietnam. And I'll bet you didn't know that Wichita Falls played a very big part in that. So stay tuned because I'm going to tell you the story, and if I can get through it without crying, that would be spectacular. We're starting right now. Hi, I'm Debbie Dobbins. I'm your host for this episode of Your Wichita Falls, and I want to share a little personal story before I get into the meat of this video. I grew up in the 70s. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna start crying already. And I remember as a little girl, well, teenager, I was probably 15 or 16 years old, and the across the street neighbor had a cousin who came to visit. Now, as all 16-year-olds, well, a lot of 16-year-old girls are, I was boy crazy, and this person, he was, I guess, probably 18, 19, or 20, and I was immediately infatuated with him. And when I found out, which it hadn't hit close to home at that point, that he had been drafted and he was about to go to Vietnam, it all of a sudden became very real. And back then, which I think that people just don't really understand in today's world, what a draft is like. I lived through that, and I had so many friends that had to go that they didn't really want to. And at the same time, this young man, we got a call, or the family got a call later that he wasn't coming home. Things really hit hard back in the 70s. And so there's a lot of things about that war that a lot of people don't want to talk about. I will say, though, this Operation Homecoming was, when the war was over, there were a lot of prisoners of war. One of our great senators, John McCain, was one of those prisoners of war, and there's a movie made about it. And believe me, none of us would ever want to go through that. But in 1973, surprisingly, Shepherd Air Force Base, right here in Wichita Falls, had the honor of serving as a reception point for the Operation Homecoming vets coming back, to welcome them home after all of these years of captivity. And this is just something that I learned today, honestly, because of what happened to me the other day when I was out on a walk looking for a sunrise. So what I have to share with you about Wichita Falls is it constantly surprises me. There's so much good and wonderfulness and magic, and it just warmed my heart that Shepherd was a reception point. Back in 1973, the Air Force cargo plane arrived at Shepherd with 38 Americans, officers, enlisted, and civilians returning home to their families and their lives as free Americans. How cool is that? And the thing about it is that that war, the nation made an about face when it came to those who served, and it's a really tough lesson that we learned over roughly 40 years since that war ended, because there has never been a war so controversial in our nation's history. This sounds a little weird, but it was my war. It was the war that was going on when I was in those impressionable years, and there was so much dissension around it. And it's interesting to contrast that now with seeing a young airman in uniform if you're walking through an airport or walking down a street, because people can hardly walk through these areas and see a service person in their service uniforms, and people will say thank you for your service. Or they're eating at a restaurant and someone pays for their meal. But that didn't happen during the Vietnam years, because for more than 30 years now, the US military has been the most trusted and most respected institution in the United States. But what really warmed my heart this week, besides finding this Vietnam memorial, which I'm going to share a video of it with you, was that Shepherd played a role in the repatriating of these American prisoners of war. And I can assure you, if you've ever seen or read anything about what they went through, it makes me choke on my tears, because it's really amazing. So but they came home after Operation Homecoming They came on a C-141 Starlifter. This cargo plane arrived at Shepherd in February 1973. And I am telling you, I would have loved to have been here to see that. And I can only think about what it must have been like. And there's a picture, there's actually a lot of pictures, but I'm just including one of a gentleman sitting in a car. It's a black and white picture looking at a news article about them coming home. And you know, these family members received their loved ones and they were captured on video and on pictures, and all this excitement of children seeing their father that we come to expect now when we see someone coming back from being deployed, and the embrace of a husband and a wife and laying her head on his shoulder or pressing his hand against hers. And these scenes then were the exception to the rule. It wasn't always like this. So I think it's really important when we had no ticker tape parades for them, no crowds sitting at the airport to welcome them when they came home. They were greeted instead with disregard or disrespect. And many of them still struggle, which you can have to imagine, from deep, deep wounds. The Vietnam vets have probably the highest homeless rate than any other group of our soldiers and our service people, because those wounds are so deep and they're seen and unseen. And our Vietnam vets deserve so much more than what they got. They got from returning when they returned from Vietnam. They didn't volunteer. That's what's really, well, a lot of them didn't volunteer. But they fought valiantly and brilliantly. Oof. And many paid this ultimate sacrifice in defense of our democracy. So imagine my surprise, because I went to the unveiling of this memorial statue well over, I think it's 2 years ago now, and it was held at an event with the Daughters of the American Revolution at a lady's house up in the fancy schmancy part of Wichita Falls. And it's a beautiful statue and I loved it. And I think I even did a video on it. And then I knew that they were going to place it out at the Wichita Lake. And I hadn't gone out there. You know, my life gets busy. You probably realize that by now. But they unveiled this memorial out at the park. And it's an example of our country righting a wrong right here in Wichita Falls. Because we as a nation owe these veterans the same debt of gratitude that we give to all of the other service members that we see every day. Because regardless of your personal view of politics, there's a great quote on this memorial that says, "For those we shall never forget." It's emblazoned on the bronze base of the statue. So this is a video, and I'm gonna have a little music behind it, and I really encourage you. It's at sunrise, and I know I've been talking. You may not even got to this part of the video, which I hope you did, because this memorial depicts a soldier consoling a medic holding a folded American flag. And inscribed on the plaque are the words, "In honor and grateful appreciation of soldiers of the United States of America, who answered our nation's call during the Vietnam War." Whew. We honor your service and your courage. We promise in your name. I'm sorry I'm so emotional, but it's so important. We promise in your name never to allow our political persuasions or personal opinions to bind us to the sacrifice made by those who bear the burden of comment in the service of our nation. You know, one of the things that I think is so important, especially when I learned about this memorial and went to the unveiling of the actual statue, is that it is so incredibly peaceful and wonderful. And I went at sunrise, and this whole memorial is just a vow in their memory never to disregard or disrespect the men and women who on our behalf pay the price of freedom. That memorial was in the works for 5 years and was installed at the lake over a year ago, which, as I said, I cannot believe it's taken me this long to serendipitously land upon it. But I had the pleasure of attending that unveiling, as I said, over a couple of years ago. But this permanent location at the lake, oh my gosh, it's just magical. You know, you find things when you find them. But when I went down there and then I realized what I had stumbled upon because I knew it was down there, but just escaped my mind. I went there to see a sunrise, and instead I was flooded with tears just like this. Because as I took in the landscape of this incredible memorial and the location of it right on the lake and the sun coming up over the little hill that's down there, I can only imagine the emotions of those who were at this unveiling of the actual resting place of this memorial. The commemoration committee who created this memorial, all from donations, mind you, this all came from our community, no government funds. They chose this location down here by the lake because it is beautiful and peaceful and serene, and I can testify that that truly is the case. The committee wanted a place where those who came there to heal and reflect on their time of service, their family members, their extended family members, could really just embrace the solitude of what is down there. And so what's so important is that to know that our little Wichita Falls was so instrumental in this closure of the Vietnam War, and we've done our part to recognize those that have served. And I am so blessed to be in a community that is historical from that perspective. And the local Daughters of American Revolution were very instrumental in helping with this process. So if you get a chance, please stay tuned for this video of the actual magical memorial down there. And if you get a chance, go down there in real time and go at sunrise or sunset, because it's just beyond words. Y'all come back now, you hear?